How is the Communist Chinese Party bioweapon advancing world government? Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Welcome, friends. This is David Schnitker, your host for today's program. Thanks for joining us. Just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with Bible prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You will find a donate link on the homepage. The website address again is www.swpm.us. Thank you for your prayers and support of this faith ministry. On today's podcast, I will be discussing my June 2020 Last Days Beacon article entitled The Wuhan Coronavirus in Bible Prophecy: How the CCP Bioweapon is Advancing World Government. Since early this year, the COVID-19 pandemic has been the leading news story around the world. In this podcast, I will deal with the question as to how this pandemic fits into Bible prophecy. As such, I will seek to tell the truth as best I know it, regardless of what you may be hearing in the mainstream media. I will also seek to be forthcoming as to how this emergency is contributing to the Antichrist system of global control predicted in the Bible. We begin with the prediction made by Jesus in the Olivet Discourse in answer to his disciples' question, "And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Matthew 24, verse 3. The answer to that question deals with many signs or events that will portend his second coming. We read of some of those events or signs in Matthew 24, verse 7. "For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." Now, Webster's dictionary defines pestilences as any virulent or fatal, contagious, or infectious disease, especially one of epidemic proportions. Now, friends, it is probable that at the time of Christ's predictions, contagious diseases of epidemic proportions did not exist. However, as we approach the tribulation and the second coming, contagious diseases of epidemic proportions now exist. For example, the world experienced the Spanish flu, which killed approximately 50 million people about a century ago. Now, another prophecy that's relevant to the current pandemic is found in Daniel 7:23. "The fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces." Daniel is predicting in his vision of four great beasts in Daniel 7 that the final beast or kingdom will be worldwide in its scope and unlimited in its power. Now, obviously, this coming worldwide kingdom under the control of the Antichrist will include the United States. So how does America transform from a constitutional republic with limited defined governmental power into a totalitarian government that has been merged into a global political system? In my view, this will be through a series of strategic emergency crises. The Wuhan coronavirus is one of those crises. Rahm Emanuel, former chief of staff of President Obama, famously said, "You never let a serious crisis go to waste." And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. Now, Rahm Emanuel first made that statement during the financial crisis of 2008. He recently repeated that statement, referring to the Wuhan crisis. James Clyburn, Democrat congressman from South Carolina, made a similar statement in regard to the economic stimulus bill related to the virus that was passed in March. Clyburn said the economic stimulus bill is a tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision. I'm reminded of what Thomas Paine, famous Revolutionary Era author, stated presciently when he said, "Liberty is never more at risk than during a crisis." For example, look at all the liberty-reducing changes that came about as a result of the 9/11 crisis. The Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, the Department of Homeland Security, the TSA, secret FISA courts, etc. These changes are never going away. When the government takes your liberties, they never give them back. Likewise, the changes I will be describing in this podcast will never go away unless there is massive citizen resistance. The changes being implemented as a result of the Wuhan coronavirus pandemic are quickly becoming the new normal. I predict that the masks, the gloves, the thermometers, the social distancing will never go away. Friends, this unbearable Orwellian world is the new normal. Now, it is important to emphasize at the outset that this is a manufactured crisis. In other words, contrary to the propaganda of the Chinese Communist Party, this virus did not emerge by accident from the Wuhan wet markets. The truth is, this virus was created in the Wuhan Virology Institute lab with assistance in the United States during the Obama administration. It is properly called the CCP coronavirus. Let me quote from a March 22nd, 2020 article that appeared in WorldNet Daily by Lieutenant Colonel James Zumwalt entitled, "Whose Fingerprints Are on the Coronavirus?" Quoting from the article. As the coronavirus took global flight, Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health, made a startling revelation. He warned, it is at least 10 times deadlier than the seasonal flu. But it is biological warfare expert Professor Francis Boyle that details what may have led to the coronavirus having such a powerful punch. Boyle explains the concept of gain of function. This is work that involves activating genetic mutations to more strongly enhance their impact. In layman's terms, it is the equivalence of placing a virus on steroids. Boyle details evidence as to how it may well have come into play to increase the lethality of the virus. As China and the U.S. play the blame game as to who is responsible for the pandemic, Boyle names names, explaining that several different sets of fingerprints were involved. The biological weapons expert is clear at the outset that there is little doubt that the coronavirus now touring the globe came out of China's biowarfare lab in Wuhan. Regardless of what the Chinese government says in its efforts to cloud the issue, to focus responsibility elsewhere, and regardless of assertions by American liberals that we are racist for calling it such, the release of the coronavirus bears a Made in China stamp. However, Boyle's investigation also reveals that others linked to various stages of development of the virus must share some responsibility as well. Boyle tells us that he has definite evidence that a biowarfare lab at the University of North Carolina was the initial catalyst for the virus. He had criticized the lab earlier for its gain-of-function work. He condemns UNC for its DNA genetic engineering on, quote, every hideous biological warfare agent you can imagine, including MERS, that is the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, an agent which again is a biowarfared coronavirus. In the interview, Boyle read from a study underscoring that the UNC lab project had discovered, quote, a SARS-like cluster of circulating bat coronaviruses that showed potential for human emergence. Shockingly, the study noted involvement in the project not only by the UNC researchers and FDA representatives, but also by Zhang Li-Shi, a scientist at the Laboratory of Special Pathogens and Biosafety, Wuhan Institute of Virology, Chinese Academy of Sciences in Wuhan, China. Acknowledging the National Natural Science Foundation of China at the study's end made it clear that the coronavirus technology was not stolen from China, but that Beijing had paid the University of North Carolina to have one of its top biological weapons experts involved in the project. End of quote. So let's talk about the prediction of the Wuhan coronavirus. We've seen that the origin of it was that it was a man-made bioweapon, but this was a pandemic that was planned in advance. And while this pandemic took most of the world's citizens by surprise, it did not surprise the global elites who had wargamed the scenario many years before. For example, in May of 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation, along with the Global Business Network, published an article entitled "Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development," which used game theory to map out different scenarios that both reduced and enslaved the world's population, all under the guise of helping to solve hypotheticals. Let's consider one of their hypothetical scenarios in this 2010 article. In one scenario called Lockstep, they set forth one possible scenario, quoting from Operation Lockstep. In 2012, the pandemic that the world had been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months, the majority of them healthy young adults. This pandemic also had a deadly effect on economics. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. Sound familiar? During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. Keep in mind, this was a 2010 report. Now let's look at the implications of the Wuhan coronavirus. There are several implications or transformations of this pandemic that I believe relate to Bible prophecy. And I'd like to deal with 3 of these world transformations. First of all, world government. The Bible predicts that during the tribulation, a world government, a world economy, and a world religion will come to fruition under the leadership of the false prophet and the Antichrist. Revelation 13 and Revelation 17 and 18 describe these developments. While these satanic developments are hindered during the church age, according to 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 6 through 8, it is possible and plausible to think that progress will be made in that direction even during the last days of the church age in which we live. How then is progress made toward a one-world government and all that it entails? I believe it will be through a series of strategic and managed crises of a global nature. After all, the experts tell us that a global crisis requires a global response. Consider, for example, a March 26, 2020 article by Larry Elliott in The Guardian entitled, "Gordon Brown Calls for a Global Government to Tackle Coronavirus," quoting from the article. Gordon Brown has urged world leaders to create a temporary form of world government to tackle the twin medical and economic crises caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The former Labor Prime Minister said there was a need for a task force involving world leaders, health experts, and the heads of the international organizations that would have executive powers to coordinate the response. This is not something that can be dealt with in one country, he said. There has to be a coordinated global response, end quote. Let's talk now about digital dollar, the digital dollar. The Bible predicts that when global government comes to a brief fruition at the midpoint of the tribulation, that the Antichrist will activate a comprehensive and global cashless society. We read in Revelation 13, verses 16 and 17, that he, that is the Antichrist, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, there has been much speculation regarding the nature of the mark of the beast. Some say it is some kind of a digital tattoo on the surface of the hand or the forehead. Others speculate that it may be some kind of microchip that is preloaded, like some kind of debit card. Regardless, all agree that this coming economic system involves the elimination of cash, whether paper or coinage. It is interesting that the current pandemic is moving that cashless society agenda forward. Consider, for an example, an April 20, 2020 article by Gina Gerva of the Legal Executive Institute entitled, "Will COVID-19 Make Cash Obsolete?" Quoting from the article, "Is the COVID-19 pandemic more quickly moving the world to a cashless society? One where almost all financial transactions are not conducted with physical banknotes or coins, but rather through the transfer of digital information via a smartphone?" Technologist and futurist Joe Rosinsky explains why cash may no longer be king, and how the fear of banknotes carrying and passing the coronavirus itself may help us to get there more immediately. Joe Rosinsky says, "Sooner than we thought, we will be moving away from the possibility of literal dirty money, meaning legal cash tender. Believe it or not, the United States was on the cusp of issuing a digital dollar at the end of March as part of the early draft for the COVID-19 stimulus package. Bold and powerful policymakers vied for the creation of a digital dollar." End of quote. What a coincidence. A third development toward the fulfillment of Bible prophecy is the mark of the beast. The Wuhan pandemic is also moving forward the idea of an international digital tattoo, a precursor to the mark of the beast. Infamous eugenicist Bill Gates is championing this technology. Quoting from a March 19, 2020 article that appeared in Biohack Info News titled, "Bill Gates Will Use Microchip Implants to Fight Coronavirus." Quoting from the article, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates will launch human implantable capsules that have digital certificates, which can show who has been tested for the coronavirus and who has been vaccinated against it. Gates was responding to a question on how businesses will be able to operate while maintaining social distancing. And he said that, quote, "Eventually, we will have some digital certificates to show who has recovered or been tested recently, or when we have a vaccine, who has received it." The digital certificates Gates was referring to are human implantable quantum dot tattoos that researchers at MIT and Rice University are working on as a way to hold vaccination records. The quantum dot tattoos involve applying dissolvable sugar-based microneedles that contain a vaccine and fluorescent copper-based quantum dots embedded inside biocompatible micron scale capsules. After the microneedles dissolve under the skin, they leave the encapsulated quantum dots whose patterns can be read to identify the vaccine that was administered. End of quote. Make no mistake, friends, the coronavirus is not the end game. It is the vaccine that is the hammer that will hammer humanity. And this quantum dot tattoo under the skin, this mark of the beast precursor, will be the mark that you have received this vaccine. And if you haven't received the vaccine, you cannot work. You cannot leave your house. That's where this is going, friends. So let me conclude. The Antichrist system of global control over the political, economic, and religious system will not drop out of the sky at the midpoint of the tribulation. Rather, it will be developed incrementally with each successive engineered crisis. The Wuhan coronavirus pandemic illustrates that the night is far advanced and the day of our redemption draws nigh. As Jesus said in Luke 21, verses 25 through 28, "And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth." And that's what we're seeing, friends. Men's hearts failing them for fear and the expectations of the things that are coming upon the earth. "For the power of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory." Now, when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. My friends, are you ready? The Bible tells us quite clearly how you can be ready. Romans 10 verse 9 states, "If you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved." Friends, if you've not trusted Christ, I pray that you will do so today. Well, friends, we are offering an excellent article to accompany this discussion. Our June 2020 Last Days Beacon article is entitled, "The Wuhan Coronavirus in Bible Prophecy," subtitled, "How the CCP Bioweapon is Advancing World Government." This full-length 6-page article is available to you to accompany today's podcast. You may order 5 copies for a donation of $5 or 25 copies for a $15 contribution. Just go to our website, www.swpm.us, and go to our bookstore. The bookstore link is on the home page. Type in the title, Wuhan Coronavirus. The website again is www.swpm.us. Well, friends, thanks for joining us for today's podcast. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, this is your host, David Schnitker. Thanks for listening.